It's Wisdom Wednesdays. I am Ariana Newcomer, Dove Oracle Priestess, and today I am going to talk about the power of partnership. This is one of the essential pieces that we work with in the Wise Woman Immersion. And the women in that program, the ones who have been through it, the ones who are in it, have pretty much all found that by doing the practices that we do, learning the things that we learn in the Wise Women Immersion, their relationships all improve without them having to really work too much at it. So these concepts of partnership are really, really powerful. And I use the work of Riane Eisler. I really have found that her particular languaging around this issue is really, really helpful. And I've been blessed to have been able to study with her some personally. And I think that she's just one of the great minds on the planet right now. She was born in Austria in a Jewish family, and she's now in her 80s. And they got out of Austria during just ahead of the Nazis on the last boat that was accepted into Cuba of Jewish refugees before they started turning them back. And the ones who were turned back pretty much all died in the concentration camps. So she grew up just wondering about this. Why is it that when people can be so wonderful and so loving and so generous and kind, how does this kind of evil happen? And she didn't find anything in the philosophy that she read or the religious studies that explained it for her. And she came up with this whole idea about domination versus partnership, and that the culture that we have had on the planet for thousands of years has been primarily this dominator culture in which power is maintained through fear and violence. Power is power over others. Those in power disempower those under them. And that this carries through from governments all the way into families and religions. And she also looked at the historical record and found that there were ancient societies that were partnership cultures where both men and women held power, and they were primarily agricultural. They did not tend to go to war. They were goddess worshiping, so they were in partnership with Earth as well as with each other. And her book, The Chalice and the Blade, is one of the great books on this subject. And there are others. There are other people who have re-examined the historical record, because these cultures were essentially written out of the historical record because the victors get to write the history, yeah? So I read that book back in the 80s, and it just really, really opened up a lot for me and started me on the path of becoming a priestess and returning into the divine feminine, being an advocate for the feminine. So this concept of partnership is one of the reasons that I feel it's so valuable is because instead of talking about patriarchy versus matriarchy, and those partnership cultures, the ancient ones were matrilineal, meaning that names tended to be and possessions tended to be passed down the mother's line, is that when we are always saying the patriarchy has to go, we're demonizing the patriarchy, all of our problems are because of the patriarchy, it really becomes it really puts this huge onus on the men. And the truth is that the men are damaged as much by the dominator culture as women are, in different ways. So when we are in partnership, we begin by coming into partnership with self. And this is a lot of what we do in the Wise Woman Immersion. We have a lot of practices to come into greater alignment within ourselves and in partnership with ourselves and in partnership with our so-called shadow aspects, which when we bring them into our awareness and we give them a love and we come into partnership with them, can become aligned. So we become more aligned within ourselves. And that practice of partnership with self is the first one that Riane Eisler talks about in her book, The Power of Partnership, which I highly recommend. This is it. And she talks about 7 different areas of partnership. Partnership with self is first, then with our intimate others, then into our work and communities, then into our national community, into our international community, then into partnership with nature, and then partnership in our spirituality. And partnership means, in terms of power, it means having power with instead of power over. And I'm noticing those words cropping up a lot in a lot of articles that I'm reading. So her work and her language is getting out there for people to use and understand. And these principles of partnership, of holding power with and of empowering those that you have power with, is starting to come into management practices in corporations now too. So partnership is becoming this new paradigm of leadership instead of a rigid hierarchy of power over. And this gives us more agency and more satisfaction in our work lives to be held in partnership instead of dominated. So this is a wonderful, wonderful practice. I really encourage you all to learn more about partnership and begin practicing it, especially beginning with self, because we can't really truly be in partnership with others until we're more in partnership with ourselves. And of course, like any wisdom practices, it's a lifelong learning. It's a spiral path. So we always continue to learn and grow on the path of partnership, just as we do on our path of wisdom and our path of spiritual growth and personal growth. So I am still enrolling the Wise Women Immersion. We are starting soon. I would love to have a few more beautiful women join us. And we do, as I mentioned, engage deeply in this practice of partnership with self. And we also work with partnership with nature in the program. And it's very rich and very nourishing. So if it's time for you to do something for yourself, because as women, we always tend to be focused on doing for others and doing for others. And we come to a time generally in our lives when we have to start paying more attention to ourselves. We have to start giving to ourselves. We have to come into this partnership with self and stop giving to others. We can actually do more for others when we care for ourselves. Our self-care is really essential. So I look forward to talking with you about whether the Wise Women Immersion is right for you. There will be a link in the comments below where you can find out more and schedule a time to talk with me. So do look into partnership. Being in partnership is so much more joyful than being in dominator mode. Bye.